Welcome to the Sports Business Classroom Audio Experience, where we take you inside the business of basketball. As the NBA calendar shifts from playoffs to planning, front offices across the league are already deep into the most critical stretch of the year, the offseason. In this episode, we're joined by three of the most respected voices of the game, Bobby Marks, Tommy Sheppard, and Ryan McDonough. Together, they break down how NBA teams approach the offseason, from evaluating coaching staffs and front office structure to roster construction, draft preparation, and summer league strategy. If you've ever wondered what really happens behind the scenes as teams build for the future, this is the conversation you won't want to miss. Let's get into it.
I'm Bobby Marks from ESPN and lead instructor for Sports Business Classroom, and I'm got the privilege to have Tommy Sheppard, longtime executive, former Washington Wizards general manager, jump on here, and Ryan McDonough, longtime executive, Boston Celtics, and former Phoenix Suns GM, and currently with Sirius XM. And I figured what we would do is, because we've all kind of had different paths along the way. We've all had teams that are playing right now in the playoffs. We've all had teams that have been eliminated or getting ready for the lottery. We've all been part of a coaching search and everything. And since the coaching search is probably the hot topic right now, we saw on Sunday, Doc Rivers parted ways with Milwaukee. And then Ryan just shared with me a tweet, I guess, from Mark Stein, that they're going to open up the coaching search in New Orleans with that will include James Borrego as part of that process here. So let's start with Tommy. Let's say you have a situation like New Orleans, and Willie Green gets let go in I think they were 2-10. I wrote their article. They were 2-10 when they got let go, and James Borrego gets named the interim. He takes over for the rest of the year. Does a pretty good job. It's they didn't win. They lost a bunch down the stretch, and I was funny. I always say I'm the kiss of death on everything. I texted with James back in like mid-March, and they had their record was like in a stretch of games was like top 10 of all teams, and then they wound up losing like 9 in a row. So I was like, goodness gracious. But so the season ends. What happens now as far as when you open up a search like this? You're not hiring James, but you're not removing him. He's part of the mix of people that you're in. What happens now as far as how you go about doing a search here?
Well, and my guess is that they've been preparing for this for a while. I don't think they decided today that they're going to start their search today. You know, you want to have a pretty wide, cast a very wide net. Like, where are the best young basketball minds? Where are the veteran coaches who are outside the box people, and really start to knit together a list of people that are very exciting that you can have rounds of interviews with just to get to know each other. And I think you have to have that first interaction. You call it a chemistry call if you want, but really trying to hit as many different people to gather as many different ideas of how do you want your team to play. Before you can do any of that, you got to know what are our strengths. What do we need to improve on? What do we think is missing that we can be very aware of as we're hiring coaches? Who's going to be the most additive person to this culture, to this environment?
How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, Bobby, one of the things I like is that these teams made a quick decision. I think that's always advantageous, because I think what we're going to see happen here over the next couple of days and weeks as teams get eliminated from the play-in and then the playoffs, you're probably going to see more coaching changes then. So if you're Milwaukee and to some extent New Orleans, and you think you're going to make a coaching change or know you're going to make a coaching change, I always think you do it right away, because then you can get a jump on the interview process, because you guys know how this goes. They're always hot candidates. Tommy mentioned some of the different groupings you can talk from. And that's one of the things that I think is important organizationally. Is, do we have a specific type of coach we want? Do we want an NBA veteran, so to speak, a guy who's been a head coach before? Okay, that makes the process a little easier, because then, certain types are narrow. I always think the best processes, I'd love to get your opinion on it, Bobby and Tommy as well, is when you at least start pretty broad and say, okay, we don't want to be pigeonholed into this one grouping. Well, let's look at some guys who have been head coaches in the NBA, but also let's look at some assistant coaches. Let's look at some guys in the G League. Let's let's look at college coaches, maybe international. Are there some females who would be good candidates? And just really start broad, but then you narrow it down relatively quickly. So I think teams that do it well do that and give themselves a better chance. But yeah, New Orleans is interesting because, as you mentioned, Bobby, James Borrego is in the mix. Although from my experience, I think history shows that it's usually not a great candidate if the interim guy doesn't just get hired. If they open it up, I think more times than not, the interim guy ends up not being the guy at the end of that process.
Yeah, I mean, we went in Brooklyn. When I was in Brooklyn, we had let go Avery Johnson in the middle of the year, right around Christmas time, and PJ Carlissimo came on and took over, and we went like that. I think we went like 33-19, but we wound up losing in 7 games to Chicago, left a bad taste in ownership's mouth. And when you look back on it, like that would have been the right move. Like you had enough body of work as far as, you're 14 games over 500 and you're one of your better, you have one of the better records. How about for the both of you, and you touched on a little bit here, Ryan, the makeup of your roster, as far as like, I'll give you what's like Milwaukee. Milwaukee is interesting because you have it's a veteran team on paper, and you have Giannis, who might be there, might not be there. I don't know. How do you kind of gauge when, based on like where your roster is? Like there are certainly some teams that are younger and you want more of a player development, a young assistant. Phoenix goes and gets Jordan Knott, who's, comes from that player development, former assistant, but they're not a young team, but they really needed a developmental curve there. How do you gauge it based on where you are roster wise, as far as age wise, as far as who the group of people that you're targeting?
Can I decline Milwaukee and have you pick one of the other 29 teams? So it'd be easier.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Milwaukee is hard.
That's a tough one. Yeah.
You could be a win all now team, or you could be a team that's going to be like retooling, right? Like it's a funny story. When we hired Jason Kidd in 2013, like what he signed up for was a lot different than what he wound up getting. Like it was very different. And I think Milwaukee's a different situation, certainly with the Giannis thing. But how do you look at your roster as far as that? I guess the personalities and the developmental compared to maybe a team that's a little bit older, where you maybe need a little bit of more of a seasoned coach.
Yeah, I say that obviously joking, not trying to pick on Milwaukee. They've been among the NBA's best teams now for a decade. You look at their win total over the last 10 years, the championship in 2021. The problem, as we know, is that catches up to you eventually, the spending, not only the financial spending, but pushing their draft picks and swaps into the middle of the table. Their young players they've drafted have been, later in the first round or second round, and most of them have not worked out great. And I bring that up because I think organizationally, Bobby, the first thing you need to decide is, what are we going to do with Giannis? I know that sounds simplistic, but because I think it's a different coach, in my opinion, or a different coaching prototype. If we're keeping Giannis, we're trying to extend Giannis and building around Giannis, versus if we're trading Giannis for as many young players and draft picks as we can get and then going through a full-blown rebuild. Those are two different things. And so I think some of the easier coaching hires is when the direction's already chosen, right? It's when you have a veteran team that was maybe a playoff team but did not get as far as you thought it could go or ownership thought it could go, then if it's a similar group or a team that you think has a chance to be better, then it's the veteran experienced coach, right? We feel like we're right there, but we need somebody to put us over the top. On the flip side, if it's an extremely young team, for example, like if Washington or Utah or, one of those teams made a coaching change, I think you probably skew younger player development still, because that's what it's going to look like, I think, most likely. So I think that's the first thing is put the names aside, put the kind of boxes of coaches aside. Let's figure out our direction as a franchise, and then that'll help inform who we interview and ultimately who we hire in the coaching search.
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest challenge this early is making sure that there's internal alignment exactly what we're looking for, because it can get to a point where I think everybody internally in the front office is agreeing this is what we're looking at, and then ownership is going to have a big stake in that too. And sometimes ownership loves to win press conferences or things like to get out. It's really controlling your message, clarifying exactly what it is we're looking for, and then going the patient route is the most important. I think anybody that thinks their roster in May is going to look the same as it does in July is crazy. There, things come up, and you hear that so many times when a coach is leaving or has been asked to leave. They say, "Well, this isn't the roster I signed up for," and they make a great point. It's not fair, but that's the business of this business, unfortunately. And so I think there needs to be a really, really good reflection on exactly where the team, we feel that the players who are going to return, what do they need to do, and how do they best respond to coaching? Because you hear that every time when they fire a players coach, they bring in the exact opposite, and it just kind of flip flops, and that's not the way to go either. I think it is a copycat league, as you guys both know. A lot of teams will look and say, okay, well, what coaches are making a big breakthrough? Is there someone like that? Is there someone on their staff? Is there, those are the kinds of things that go through the thought process as you're going through this.
Well, and you're right. I mean, we went through a period where it was the college coaches. We went heavy, whether it be Pitino in Boston or Cal Perry in New Jersey, Lon Kruger too. We had a group of coaches that kind of came through and everything like that. How about let's kind of shift away from the coaching stuff. Yesterday I was joking with my wife. I said yesterday was day 174, which means is the last day of the season. And for some, there's 10 teams that are sitting home right now. There's a group that are going to be in the play-in this week, and then there's another group that they're going to get ready to play start Saturday. For the 10 lottery teams, what does a Monday look like for them? Or maybe it already started as far as whether it be like the exit interview process. Even some of these, let's say some of these teams lose this week. There's going to be 4 teams that lose. What is kind of like the next day or the day after kind of look like here?
I think one of the things we always did, Bobby, was try to get the exit interview started as quickly as possible to be respectful of the time that these folks have put in. Keep in mind, most of the players show up, if not in August, by Labor Day or so. So they've been doing this even as a non-playoff team for 7 straight months now, whatever it has. It's been from preseason, training camp, and then through the regular season. So and one of the other things I like doing, especially with the young players in particular on non-playoff team, would say, look, take your break now because we want you to come back. We want you to be back here, especially the guys who are going to participate in summer league, be part of your off-season workouts. It's different with young players versus veteran players. Veteran guys, you give more rope and more leeway, especially the guys who've had long, successful careers. They kind of know what to do, and you trust them to come back later in the off-season. So that was kind of it. And, at the high level, I mentioned the most important things from, the owner. Is the owner good with kind of what's going on? And then down to, front office, head coach. Are we all going to be here, frankly, in the front office or on the coaching staff? And if not, when do those conversations take place? Just a reminder for our viewers, that most NBA, I think pretty much all NBA contracts are on the July 1st to June 30th calendar. So the fiscal year doesn't mean a whole lot in the NBA. So one of the things we always try to figure out as soon as possible is if we're going to make changes, people have to go find jobs elsewhere. And, keep in mind, it's not like they have a big golden parachute or something. If their contract's up the end of June, that's only a couple months away from at this point. So you also want to be fair to the employees and staff members. Say if you were going to move on for somebody, give them an opportunity to kind of know what you're going to do. Because, it's a small industry. It's tough to get jobs in the NBA at a high level. You want to give them some time to go find work elsewhere as you're trying to, prepare for the draft and get your roster set for next season.
What about you, Tommy? Day after.
We try to knock out interviews, especially with maybe players that aren't playing a whole lot of minutes. You can start 3 weeks ahead of time, as you know when the season's going to be over. Especially, even if you are in the playoffs, there's a lot of stuff that you can get done beforehand and really save the time for the most. I think the biggest downloads got to come with the players that had the most minutes, that had the most experiences, the injured people. What was their experience like? And you're looking for ways to improve. But you want that to be an authentic experience. You don't want it to be on a shot clock. Okay, we got 10 minutes. Let's download about the whole season. So I always try to meet with people throughout that last month of the season and really try to connect and make sure we were all disseminating the information to each other. We're all relaying okay, these are things that we need to focus on, areas that we need to focus on. But what do you really want from the players at the end of the season? You really want what worked? What can we do better? How can we serve you? And what do you plan to bring back to the team? What do you think your skill development needs to be? Make sure we're all in agreement with that. The weight room, the strength and conditioning is critical. The physical therapists and the medical staff, those are critical downloads. I'd much rather make sure that we have a great idea where they are physically with the exit physicals. I mean, those are far more important. We can get you out on the phone a little bit later in the summer than rush a quick thing. So to me, it was always the meetings that you can have as far in advance as possible to make sure the ones that you did have as soon as the season's over, that those can be as meaningful as possible.
How about the planning process with your head coach as far as like kind of formulating a plan for your roster for next year? Like there's kind of phases, certainly the draft will be part of it and then free agency. But what about as far as sitting down with your group and looking at your current roster and seeing like what makes sense, whether it be guys on your roster, whether it be free agents that you have, as far as, do you have a little bit of, I know there are teams that will play into June and you're kind of a little bit in a different territory here, but do you kind of get away from it a little bit and then you kind of regroup as a group in a few weeks, or are you kind of jumping right in it?
Yeah, good question. So when you're a non-playoff team, it obviously stinks because you're not competing at the highest level, but you do have more time. The offseason, you can kind of stagger it out. When I worked for the Celtics in 2008, 2010, we went to the finals those 2 years, and everything comes rapid fire. So it's not like you can wait till after the season. I remember we were doing pre-draft workouts. Austin Ainge and I we were the only two guys there from the Celtics because the team was playing the 76ers in Philly, and the draft players came in. They're like, where's everybody else? We're like, oh, that's just us. One will pass, one will rebound, somebody will run the clock, we'll figure it out. So it's a challenge, if you're playing deep into the playoffs. But one of the reasons I like doing these webinars and teaching classes with you guys is because we can be more honest than we were on the team side. NBA rosters are for these purposes kind of like a pyramid where who is the top guy or guys, and how do we make sure they have whatever they need? In Boston, it was Paul Pierce company. In Phoenix, Devin Booker. How do we make sure those guys are good? How do we make sure whatever to Tommy's point, strength and conditioning, nutrition, rest, medical treatment, coaches flying out to see them and work them out in their market. Let's check, and then kind of work our way down and use our resources kind of more toward the top of the pyramid, where some of the younger guys, the two-way contract guys, it might be, hey, the gym's open. If you guys want to come in, we'll take great care of you while we're here, but we're not going to jump through hoops to accommodate that. So that's kind of I think the ebb and flow of the NBA. There is a hierarchy in it, and for me, it's always make sure your best players are good, and then Tommy, I think the interesting thing is, at what point do you really get into the weeds on, the draft is kind of ongoing and there's a target date on it, but when you're eliminated, trades can happen at any time. So when do you really start to hit the trade market and then kind of overlay that with the draft and overlay that with the free agent market? Each team does that a little bit differently, and I think some of that might be where you are kind of on the franchise trajectory as far as, competing, rebuilding, trying to make the playoffs, et cetera.
Yeah, I would add, I think personnel meetings with the coach, with the head coach especially, are, to me, monthly. So not trying to pour everything into the end of the season. Now we got all the exit interviews. Now let's talk about the roster. We've been talking about the roster throughout, and there's some sort of alignment or agreement. These are the things, not necessarily the player that we can go get, but these are what we're looking for. And maybe there's 5 players that we're interested in, which is the one we have the best relationship, who's the best player, the best fit. I think sometimes we go for the best player when maybe the best fit would have been better served for everybody. The one thing I cannot say enough of is, especially after post-trade deadline, you have a better idea of what other teams in the league are willing to do. If you had extensive conversations with every team in the league, everybody has an idea. Usually the trades that happened this summer didn't happen at deadline, but were discussed. And vice versa. A lot of stuff is going to get pushed to the trade deadline this summer if it doesn't get done. So just keeping a really good, accurate accounting of every conversation that you have with your staff to make sure we're all on the same page about the roster construction, and then certainly around the league of who's available. I think that's really, really critical. You're not trying to do it all in one big meeting. Take it in bite-sized pieces, and it feels a lot more, in my opinion anyway, I think it's a lot more collaborative that way. And I think we really, in the NBA, the best teams that value the relationships, you're going to have relationships with almost somebody on every single team. And that's going to be your differentiator. Trying to get a player from a team and nobody in your franchise has a relationship with them, that's difficult.
How about so we've got Portsmouth this week. We've got the combine the week of, I think the lottery's the 10th, and then the combine is that week, and then most teams will do most of their individual workouts. How about the draft process? I know we say like we're in the draft process. Well, the draft process all year round. Like you're out there, you're scouting. But how about the we'll start you, Tommy. Like there's so much information teams have, right? Like you have the ability to take all that information and to kind of narrow it down and figure out who the best fit for your organization is be. And I get it. Like if you're picking one, it might be a lot different than you're picking 20, right? Like there's different things. But how about, Tommy, walk a little bit through this, like the process right now that is going on, whether it be, Portsmouth, as I said, the combine as far as what goes on there, and then when you start narrowing players to bring into your organization for their individual workouts.
I think by the time the Final Four ends, your college group and your personnel people have all narrowed down the list from, you start out the season with 400, 500 because you have international players included in that. There's all kinds of different considerations to look at prior to the draft. And then it starts to narrow. And then you really have to be patient. You got to get through the combine to see if there's any physicals that were flunked, if there's any issues there, but especially who is going to stay in the draft. And then once you have kind of that list, that working list of has not withdrawn their name, early entry people that stay, and now you really know, okay, these are the people that are going to be available to us to draft. And I think that's a big, kind of not necessarily a sigh of relief, but at least now you know who you're dealing with. I think throughout this, the biggest piece you can do between now and the combine is still information collection. Intel is the biggest commodity in this business. We've seen all the film. We have film on everybody. We've done deep dives. We have a lot of background, but you cannot possibly say we've got enough. You got to keep digging, especially when people leave campus. They leave a structured environment. Now they're out on their own. I'm not saying they're out feral, but their life has changed dramatically. It's not a structured college life anymore. They're out getting ready to interview for the biggest job of their life. There's a lot of circumstances change. So you really want to be up to date at all times. Where's that player working out with? Who's he working out with? What's their daily routine look like? Who's in their circle? I can't say it enough. Who is the decision makers in these people's lives? So we know. And we gotta build relationships with those people, especially the ones you're interested in. If you're in the lottery, it depends on where you're at. But by and large, people in the top 5, most players, they're not going to work out. If they're in the top 5, they're not going to work out for teams behind that.
Yeah.
So what if you want to make a trade or anything? You have to do all that intel right now.
You just tell the agent that you're going to trade up, right?
Yeah, that usually that got used too many times.
What about you, Ryan? How about the draft process for you as far as the prep that goes into it?
Tommy made a number of great points. One of them is from a scouting perspective. You should have most of your work done already. The games are over. The national championship's been decided. Congrats to Michigan as of a week ago. Tonight, they're the champions. So a lot of it now is the intel and also starting to kind of rank and tier players and then removing names from the board. As Tommy said, guys go back to college, which is more of a real thing now with the NIL and what some of these guys are getting paid. I thought last year's draft in the 20 to 40 range in particular was a little light because a lot of guys are making more money in college or the same amount of money but can go be the big man on campus and the star of the team in college and maybe they're borderline NBA players. So I think that part of it is real. One other thing to keep in mind that even though the NCAA is done playing, the international guys are pretty much all still playing. So as a chief decision maker, this year's draft maybe is not as international heavy as some years, but there have been some years when there are a number of players playing internationally. I think it was just 2024, Zachary Risachet, Alex Sarr, and guys like that were still playing. So the decision makers were going Tijuana Saloon on Memphis. I'm sorry, on Charlotte. So you look at that. Hey, is there anybody, especially as the main decision maker, if you were not able to go or didn't get as good of a feel for players during the year, if you can do your exit interviews relatively quickly and then go to see a guy, spend time with them, especially if that's somebody in your wheelhouse is still playing. There's no substitute for that. But Bobby, I want to get your take on. I think the lottery is a huge pivot point for trades. Yeah. Because there's a reason, and I'm sure you can elaborate a little bit, there's a reason we don't see many trades pre-lottery involving lottery picks or lottery teams. People generally want to know with certainty where the pick's going to be rather than, probability on a chart. And that goes in both directions. I think from the trading team and the team that's thinking about making the trade, they both want some certainty as far as where the picks are going to end up.
Yeah, I mean, you could even go back to February, and I remember being on TV when a lot of the Giannis stuff was going on, and someone had said like, yeah, that Atlanta's got New Orleans first this year. The most favorable of New Orleans are Milwaukee, and they said, yeah, that pick would be great for Giannis. And I said, wait a minute, don't you want to know where that pick's going to be? Like if it's number one, I don't know. So yeah, the lottery is I think the lottery is probably the next milestone date as far as what we have I think the week before is like the underclassmen as far as have to declare, which most will. And then we've got the lottery on May 10th. And there's so many different scenarios when you look at whether it be the Pacers first that they have. That's, they keep if it's in the top four, and the Clips get if it's 5 to 9, but it can only go 5 or 6. Certainly that Atlanta having New Orleans first. I put it out last night. The Clips. I mean, the Thunder are certainly going to be watching the play-in because they have an unprotected first from the Clips, and they've got a lightly protected first from Philly. So there's all these different variables, and that really kind of sets in motion as far as the trade process over the next month. You're right. I can go back and look. I don't never remember we seen a trade in April or even in May, really. Like we hear rumors and stuff, but once we get to June, that opens it up. But I think the question, because I think probably a lot of people on this are interested about is we hear about the Chicago and the process and guys working out, doing individual skill. And then a group will elect to play 5-on-5. Usually it's more of late first, seconds, undrafted two-way guys. And then we have the actual individual workouts when they come to your facility. I'll start with you, Ryan, first, and then we'll go to Tommy. How much do you guys get out of that? Like I always say, there's a reason why we send our scouts on the road. and do like a lot of like the grunt work, like they're at Baylor on a Saturday night, or they're all these places. And then when like I always laugh, and then the guy comes in, the player comes in your gym, and your coach falls in love with him, and like you read the reports, and this guy hated him, like he was like this. Like how do you kind of how much do you get out of whether it be Chicago, certainly your individual workouts, and how much do you use that as far as when you go through this process?
Yeah, Bobby, I say the only thing more dangerous than your coach falling in love with a player is your owner falling in love with a player. That's really hard. Believe me, firsthand experience there. But no, in all seriousness, this should be additive to what you've already done. You're hoping that your head coach and your coaching staff kind of like some of the guys that you and your scouting group have liked throughout the year, or vice versa. I do think there are times, and I'd love to get Tommy's take on this, where in the pre-draft workouts, a guy surprises you one way or another, right? You liked him and he has a lousy workout, or just doesn't interview well, or you didn't like him. And so I think in those cases, especially the scenario in which you didn't really like a player or see a player do something, and then he comes in and does it, for me, it always caused me to go back to the drawing board a little bit. Say, okay, are we kind of too set in our ways here? Are we looking at this objectively? Let's go back and watch some more film. Let's look at the numbers. Let's bring in some more people, maybe some folks in the coaching staff to break them down. And Tommy, I'll give you an example. A guy who really stood out in a good way in the pre-draft process was Kyle Kuzma, who you remember scouting him at University of Utah. back to the basket, kind of post. He played almost a 4-5 at times. Didn't shoot a lot. I have to go back and look at the volume of three-pointers, but it certainly wasn't a focal point of his game for the Utes, is from what I remember. And then he came in, and you could tell he'd been working on it, just bam, 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 around the arc, some of the stuff that we've seen him do in the NBA. So those for me are the eye-opening ones. Say, whoa, I didn't know he had that, or maybe didn't know he had it to that extent, which caused me and the group to go back to the drawing board and kind of reevaluate, make sure we were looking at a guy through an appropriate lens.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, Bobby, there's a ton of value in just watching the human condition, watching people's habits, how they interact with each other, how they interact with staff, how they interact with people at the hotel, the bus driver. It says a lot without really being something that you're going to quantify or you can compare. It's just as you get to know people and you get to know players, it's 30 plus years doing this stuff. You see certain things that really stand out about a person that speaks highly of their character and self-awareness, their competitiveness. How are they treating people as they're coming to and from the court? I think those are all very, very important things to note. Does it kick you out? Does it say, okay, you're so talented, but we don't like the way you interact? No, but it's something to bring up with that player. And the interviews are very valuable, I found. I think it's always important to watch people as they go through tons and tons of people through the lobby. How are they reacting? How are they conducting themselves? Are they being professional? You can be in an interview room. I fully expect people to be on their best behavior if they're going to be in the room with the front office, with the GM, the head coach. But if they don't know who those people are and they're walking around in the lobby, I've seen people act a fool in front of Jerry West because they weren't aware who Jerry West was. That's not their fault. They're young. They didn't understand. Maybe I shouldn't be doing these things in public, just on the off chance that this might get back to the team, to the team decision makers. You like to watch all that stuff. I think behavior is a huge, huge thing. It's a superpower to really be able to, in my opinion, hold it together for 48 hours, guard your character. Don't fall in with the crowd. If you see a lot of guys that aren't playing really hard in drills, do you have the stones to go play hard in those drills and stand out? You'd be surprised. Some guys get chiseled away. So there's just a lot of little tells. It's like playing poker. You're trying to pick up on everyone's tells.
Yeah, I always say, I always remind people, like, when they come in and work out for your team, sometimes they're going 1-on-0 or 1-on-1. And, one agent doesn't want to have a player go against another player, or you have multiple guys from one agency coming in. You got to work out in two separate times. And I say, like, remember, it's 3-on-3. Like, they're going 3-on-3. I think sometimes the biggest thing with guys too is that by the time we get to like mid-June, right before the draft, these guys have been through it all. Like, they're going the travel, they're not flying charter. Like, they're going, through airports. There's weather delays. There's, they're getting in late. I remember before, prior to 9/11, I remember you were allowed to go, because I was back in the day picking up guys at the airport. You can go to the gate and pick up guys and everything like that. You didn't have to go through, the security process and everything. How about taking that into account as far as like we had a guy once who got drafted in the first round who our team psych like flunked because he was surly with her because he had been late, got in like 3 a.m, right? That process, guys, as far as like how much value, as I know I asked a little bit, but like, do you kind of toss that to the side, or is that part of it as far as kind of the attitude they have with you, maybe in the meetings in Chicago, or maybe even when they get to your own practice facility?
Well, an example like that, Bobby, I would use that in an interview and bring that up, bring it back up. Well, explain to me what was going on that day. This seemed to be like unlike your character. Is this something we can expect from you to always be surly if we get in late? Because guess what? In the NBA, you get in late about 3 times a week.
Yeah.
So you just want to try to shine a light on something that you noticed and ask for the explanation. And over time, you can compare his answer to the reality over here. And by and large, I think most players are shooting it straight. They all kind of know who they are, and that's the greatest thing in an NBA locker room. It's the ultimate meritocracy. Like the players all kind of, there's a standard, and you have to meet that standard. And the great teams, it's really a player-driven locker room. Ryan was with one of the greatest teams ever to win a ring with the Celtics. That those guys were a self-governing body, darn near. You weren't gonna step out of line with those kinds of players. It's not that way around the whole league. But I think it's very important to note behavior and reward it when it's good. Applaud, hey, let's talk about that. That's a great thing. Let's recognize that. Or the other side is, hey, this is something that we noticed. We're a little concerned. Explain this to me. And the more in depth you can ask the questions, I think you'll get by far the better answer. That now we have to go figure out what does that answer mean, and you can run it through the appropriate filters. The yes, no stuff or excusing something away just because it was a late night, I think that's letting a good chance to get more information go, and you don't want to do that.
How about draft week? Like walk the people through. We're going to talk a little bit about Sports Business Classroom in a minute here. So Greg Polinsky, who I worked with the Nets, he was our director of player personnel, and now is an assistant at Tennessee. He came out to Sports Business Classroom, and for the people who aren't familiar with Sports Business Classroom, it's a week-long teaching curriculum out in Las Vegas during Summer League. This year, it's the 12th to the 18th of July. We break the groups into different majors, front office, salary cap, scouting, video analytics, media broadcast, agent NIL. And we do curriculum with the best of the best. Tommy, Ryan have been involved. They're involved in LA, and certainly will be involved this summer here. And we do all different sessions based on the business of basketball and how to incorporate things. And so Greg came out 2 years ago and did a session on building a draft board, which is kind of one of the more, probably the one thing I probably missed, probably the only one of the few things I missed from being a league is the draft process. Putting this board together, whether it be, they got their rankings all along, but like you come in like the weekend before the draft or maybe even a little bit earlier. But how about walking through the group as far as like kind of building out a board, and then how do you kind of use that board it's different now because it's two nights. Like it used to be like we were all in there like one night, boom, right? 60 picks or whatever. Now you got the first and second round split up over 2 days though. But how about I guess two-part question, building out the draft board, and then when you get into the night of the draft, kind of sticking with that draft board.
This episode is brought to you by the Sports Business Classroom Business of Basketball Immersive Experience in Las Vegas, taking place July 12th through the 18th during NBA Summer League. The Business of Basketball program is an immersive training and educational experience for the basketball leaders of the future. If you dream of working in basketball and want to take your basketball experience, knowledge, and network to the next level, this program was designed for you. Majors include the league's salary cap, scouting, video and analytics, media and broadcast, and athlete representation. This is an amazing opportunity to invest in your future and the chance for you to prove that you have what it takes to work in the business of basketball. Listeners can take advantage of an exclusive $300 off discount using code SBCPOD. That's SBCPOD at sportsbusinessclassroom.com. Please note that space is limited and this program will sell out. So if you're interested in taking your basketball career to the next level, head over to sportsbusinessclassroom.com today.
Yeah, what I would say, Bobby, is Tommy made a great point earlier as far as the scouting process. You start with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players. And so the first thing is narrowing it down. Some of that, you do on your own. Some of that the players do for you if they return to college or the international players withdraw their name and go back and play overseas. So once the final draft field is set, you really kind of hone in on your target range, because one of the things I think is important for our viewers to know is that you don't spend an equal amount of time evaluating every player. You kind of, yes, you evaluate all of them to some extent, but the guys in your range or projected range, you spend a lot more time on because those are the guys you're likely to look at. For example, team doesn't have a first round pick this year. I don't think they're breaking down a ton of AJ DeBanza film, maybe for a trade, but other than that, it wouldn't be worth it if you're picking 42nd or 29th, to break down AJ. He's going to be long gone before then. So I think that's the first thing, and then who's in our range? Who do we like in our range? And Tommy, I always thought one of the reasons that's so important, even doing that before the combine, is because I'd go to like the team doctor and the trainer and the guys who are going to be in Chicago at the combine and say, look, here are the guys we're interested in. Here's a list of guys that we have some medical concerns about based on our scouting, our intel, all that. So keep an eye on these guys, especially maybe specific injuries or body parts for specific players. But here are the pick your number, 5, 8, 9 guys we're we're the most interested and most likely to draft. Obviously, do not show this list to anybody, but these are the guys. To your point earlier, Tom, you get a little extra time with them. You take them to the side if you have a chance to kind of cycle somebody through, even if he's completely fine medically with what you're working on. Just spend a little bit more time with him, get to know him, a little back and forth. In addition to the medical piece, we want to hear what your take on his personality. So that's kind of how we would do it. I know every team did a little bit differently, but I thought it was always important to get out ahead of Chicago in the combine, because I never wanted our medical team going in there blind and trying to figure out who is who and what is what. We want to have them kind of a specific priority list to come away with, because there's so many players to go through there. I feel like it's kind of drinking from a fire hose from a medical perspective if you try to give equal time to every guy on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Bobby, so the process isn't that draft week. It's kind of the draft month as you're starting to have Zoom calls, because there's several boards that were going at once. You have your tiers, right? Tier one, how many players do we feel are quality players that will be on their second contract in this draft? And you try to find that cutoff point of where do we think this draft cuts off in terms of valuable players that you can get, right? And that's its own exercise. And that one's it takes a long time. And so when you want to hear everybody weigh in. You have the board that we consider, here's the top 60 players that the team I work for, we're going to rank them in order. And then you have the projected board. What do we think the other teams are going to do? What's that intel come in? And then, that board is going to shift a little bit after Portsmouth, because guys, you saw people play. Did anybody play their way onto the board? Because most guys at Portsmouth are usually not in the top 60 of most people's rankings early. Then you go to the draft combine, and that's going to shift your board up a little bit. But after that, you got to realize you're going to start moving players around. There hasn't been any games played. You have no idea. How does someone that was 57th on our board all of a sudden jump to the first round? What made that happen? So one thing I always tried to protect the scouts from themselves is let's have your rankings individually so we have them before meetings. And when we go in, I have no problem with mood swings. I have no problem when people want to move players around, but we have to explain why. And it can't be, well, these four guys love that guy, and I had him low. You got to really defend it. We invested a lot of money for you to go travel and really do your work, do the due diligence, trust your work. What if you're the only one that was right and all these other people are wrong? So having their rankings is very valuable ahead of the time, and then being able to chart as we go through the meeting, after every meeting that you have about personnel, who's the highest drop or highest jumper, who's the lowest dropper off of our previous rankings, and why. And you constantly have to figure out the why on that, because sometimes, I'll be honest, you get into those deep late night meetings and people get grumpy and it pisses you off, and the agent's pissing somebody off that's trying to get them in for a workout. All of a sudden that guy draws 10 spots. It's like, I don't know, that sounds kind of personal to me. Let's keep the player out of it. Let's really look and say, why would he be that low on our board if we liked him this much ahead of time? So a lot of boards going in. The minute that you really think you got your board solid, I don't really like messing with it after that. I think a lot of bad things could come if you're feeling great, and you shouldn't feel great until draft day that you're bored. But don't be one of those guys that goes in at the last minute and start moving stuff around unless something really, really verifiable happened.
Yeah, I remember, being back in Brooklyn, and you're right. The process for us started in probably mid-June, early June, when we started bringing guys in for workouts. So you'd have your workouts, and then after we were done and you did your meetings, and we'd come as a group and we would talk about the workout. We'd watch film on certain players, and then you'd get that really good dialogue as far as, and you can tell who in the room is a little bit more protective over certain players. And, but the funny thing too is, back then is that the ability to get medicals wasn't as obtainable as it is now. Like, now everybody's got to go to Chicago as part of the CBA. Like, sometimes you'd love guys, but, you couldn't get their medical. Their agent wouldn't send you in. They didn't go to the combine and everything. I remember being on set of the night of the draft. This was when Jaren Jackson Jr. was coming out, and I don't think Memphis had his medical, or they threatened that they weren't going to send his medical, and he was coming off an injury, and about just that whole process and everything. But you're right, it's a year-long process, but it's then you kind of narrow it down, certainly in that month of that month of June and everything. Like I go back to, I've told this story a lot is Kobe. Kobe back in 96, and the rules back in 96 were a lot different. And maybe they weren't. We were just going by different rules back then. But the rules in 96 are a lot different than the rules are now. The ability to have your own players work out against draft prospects. If they ever had 3 years less of experience, that was the ultimate test. Like if you wanted a really good evaluation, put your own guys out there against some of these draft prospects coming in. And I've told this story a long time. Kobe comes in and kicks, no offense to Ed O'Bannon and Khalid Reeves, like kicks their ass, like 3 different times over. And you're like, well, this guy's pretty good. And this was before social media and everything that came with it here. And so that is like, so my message is that, like we loved him as a player and we had him really high on our board. But then you get, hey, then you get the agent involved, then you get the parents involved, and like, hey, we're not going to send him there if you draft him. And so that's like, as far as when you're in the front office, sticking to who you are, right? Like if you love a guy, who gives a crap if they're not there? What are they going to do? Sit out a year? Go back? They're not going back to college and everything like that. So there is a whole, as you guys have talked about, there's a strategy to all this, right? Like there's and then there's also the trade part too. Like the ability, maybe you want to move up in the draft, maybe you want to move back, maybe you want to get a couple picks. Like there's a whole process of this as far as when you have, and you have all your options lined up. Like you got to, A, B, C, D, like, as far as not just if a player is there when you're picking, but also, and you're going to have dialogue throughout the week as far as with teams and they say like, hey, if my guy's not there, would you do this? And that's kind of how the process, everything is lined up. Usually you're not kind of caught, you shouldn't be caught off guard as far as how things are and everything. How about you got something, Tom?
I was just going to add, I think where it's evolved to now, Bobby, is Portsmouth and the games themselves in Chicago end up being really valuable for your G League observations and evaluations. And as you're putting those teams together, the two ways are going to come from that pool a lot more than maybe what about the players that are in the lottery. They're not going to play there, so don't look to try to get anything out of their games because they're not going to be there. But the other piece is that's where I think that's a really big valuable time to evaluate all the intangibles that we talked about is right there. That's going to be your G League pool. That's going to be your two-way candidates.
Yep. How about we open it up some questions here? We got about 8 questions here. Hans asked, what teams currently in the offseason intrigue you guys the most? Ryan, what do you got?
So currently in the offseason, so the 10 teams who were eliminated, I guess. The most fascinating one to me, because I could go a variety of ways, frankly, is one of Tommy's former clubs in Washington. Just the Trae Young, Anthony Davis. They've been, I think, statistically the worst team in NBA history over a 3-year span. Now, a lot of that was obviously intentional, but where do they go from here? And how do they do it, right? There are a number of different ways. They've given themselves optionality and flexibility. It's one thing to say we're going to do this and we're going to be bad. It's another thing doing that for 3 consecutive years and saying, okay, how do we springboard out of this? Because being bad forever is not a great option for anybody, starting with the owner and the guys on the business side who are trying to sell and market. So they're an interesting one from me. And then, if I had to go Western Conference, I'd say Utah too, like with Jaren Jackson Jr. Similar, they seemingly duck that line in terms of the pick protection, all that, and look like they're going to keep their picks. So how do those two teams come out of it? Because that's one of the things that these the draft picks and young players, as you guys know, they're not always to kind of bottom and then slowly come out of it, kind of gradually up into the right. Some of these teams want to, like V-bottom, to use a stock market term, go down, hit the bottom, and then spring back up. A lot of times, as you guys know, that is led by trades more than anything else, and maybe free agent signings. The Wizards made a couple splashy deals with Anthony Davis and Trae Young, and I'm fascinated to see how the team looks. How do those guys respond? How is AD's health? A lot of question marks, which for me make them pretty intriguing.
Yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on Indiana. It's very rare that a team's in Game 7 in the NBA Finals in the following year is a high lottery team, and that's obviously because of injury. But they if they can get Halliburton back and he's healthy, they got to replace Miles. I don't think that player's on their roster. We'll see. The big trade with the Clippers was certainly a step in that direction, but they're going to get a high pick, and that was a pretty damn good team a year ago. Can they get back to that level? That's pretty intriguing to me to see where they end. And out west, I just continue to look and see some of those young teams that have been through what Ryan just described. Did you tear it all the way down to the studs? Is there a bounce up or what? I think Portland's one of those teams that we'll see how they manage this success of this season right now. If they can get through the play in and get a win or two in the first round, that qualifies as a huge success. And where do they take it next year? How do you take that next step up? Because the teams that are in the top of the lottery, they're going to be there for a while. It's a hard thing to get better in the league overnight or over one season, two seasons. It takes time. But those teams that have kind of maybe put that behind them, I would add Charlotte on the East too. I think they've done a remarkable job in the way that the direction of that franchise is going. It's great. But I think a lot of times the easiest thing is to go in the league from 20 to 35 wins and maybe 35 to 40 wins. But going 41 to 45 or 50 is just such a dramatic difference.
Well, you're right. I mean, certainly with Charlotte, who has played terrific, and it's a great story. And then, they kind of stub your toe a little bit. They got Boston twice, I think Philly, Detroit, some of the better teams up there, and you can tell they're still not quite there. And that is always the hard part, man. How do you, like I always say, like I can take a big bulldozer and knock the house down, and then I can start building it back up. But then it's like, how do you kind of make it really, really nice? That's the challenge. And I think with, Ryan, you mentioned the Wizards, which is intriguing, but you got to learn how to win.
Yeah.
You got to learn how to win, man. We have their off-season article up on ESPN.com, and I think there was a couple stats in there. They had like in the last 3 years, I think they've had only like 8 times where they have had like 3-game winning streaks and stuff. Like you got to learn how to, deal with adversity, win games, string games along, getting the 42, 43 wins is not an easy process here. How about how involved should coaches be in the draft process?
Great question. I'd say initially as involved as they want to be. You never want to restrict a coach, specifically a head coach, from being involved, watching film. But I was always pretty clear on the front office side that those were our expectations. That Tommy's earlier point, you cannot fall in love with a guy based off a 40-minute workout, that's lightly competitive, maybe even 1-on-0. That's not going to work. If you like a guy and you want to go back, watch 5-10 games, write up some reports, look at the analytical piece of it, talk to the scouts, and you still like him, then that's a different story. One of the things we do with our assistant coaches is kind of give them certain players to watch. A lot of teams have like a big man coach. We'd give them the bigs we're looking at, write up reports on these guys. Because I always wanted the work to match up with the opinion, right? If you don't really want to have a strong opinion, you just want to work guys out, that's fine. But you cannot have a strong opinion and not put the work in the time. And that for me, that goes for the head coach as well. It's obviously easier said than done when head coaches are big personalities and they make a lot of money. So that was it. I just wanted to make sure we had a thorough, robust process, and that if the coach really liked a player, he'd have to explain why and kind of back that up. And then Tommy, I think as you get down the tracks and really deeper into the weeds a little bit, it was always good to sit with the head coach and watch some film, games, really talk about the player in detail and not get seduced by a great workout, a good analytical model, the fact that another coach called this coach and told them this guy's the best player and you'd be foolish if you don't draft him. Some of this stuff does happen. I'm not being hyperbolic here. So you have to put up some kind of guardrails in place to make sure the process is solid.
Well, I think the cousin of the coach falling in love with the player because of his great workout is a player that comes in that's very, very good that has a bad workout. And trying to erase that stain is that's almost as hard as trying to talk them out of falling in love with someone that's not good enough. I think what you have to really rely on is you want them involved and you really want them to break down. Coaches are going to see the game a little bit different. They're trying to win tomorrow's game, right? But if you ask them, can you evaluate this player? Tell us what he does well. What do you think he would do well for you? How would you use him? That really involves their creative thinking and wherever they would put him. And it's important to listen to their words and the way that they bring the information back to you, because you can get a sense right away if the coach likes the player, and I think we're all in agreement that we probably like similar players. They might see something that we don't see that helps elevate that player, and they might catch something that we don't. Coaching is hard. That's the hardest job in the NBA is being a head coach of a franchise. So their careers depend on good talent and their decisions that go with that. So you want to respect that. You want that part of the process. But to Ryan's point, if you're not going to put in the work, please don't come in and put in the pick. We deserve everybody who's put in the time deserves certainly a say. Not everybody gets a vote, but I think it's really important to include the coaches. I think at your peril, don't include them and see what happens. So I really would stress to everybody as you're thinking about that relationship, it's crucial to have at least an alignment in the clarity of what we're looking to do in this draft. And if we don't get the guy that you really want, we're going to get somebody that we think is just equally as good or is going to be able to be valuable to us down the road.
This is a question for you, Tommy. It's from Arthur. As a former NBA executive who transitioned into the space of an executive leadership coach, what have you discovered in this new role, and is it being leveraged more by the front office, the GM, the head coach, and the players to add value to the team and the players individually?
I think when I left Washington, I wanted to go and learn and be as curious as possible and add soft skills. I think executive coaching, it came to me when I was with the Wizards. When I was the GM and president, it was a perk. It's something that I really enjoyed and I really took full advantage of. But I also asked myself, why the hell wasn't I doing this when I was 23 and learning how to become a leader? That's when it's really super valuable. So I just want to be additive. I think that having that skill just is another level of listening. I think the best leaders have to be level 2 listeners, which is the highest level you can possibly have when you're sitting with people, is to really ask great questions and then sit back and listen. And this helps that tremendously. I think it's just part of everything else that that comes with being a leader. Is every year trying to improve yourself, add something new.
All right, I'm just typing some of these answers.
Thanks for the question, Arthur.
Yeah, but Bobby, as you're looking through that, I got one follow-up point on what Tommy just said.
Go ahead.
One of the things I think is so important for the men and women who are listening, want to work in sports, is a lot of the attention, media-wise, fan-wise, goes to the players, right? Who you draft, who you trade for, who you sign as a free agent, 3 ways to acquire players in the NBA. But nowadays, you have to be a CEO. You have to. There's no 2 ways about it. So if you think, well, I'm just going to be a GM because I'm the best at scouting players, or I'm going to be a coach because I'm the best at X and O's, I don't really care about that other stuff. What I'm saying is you have to care about that other stuff, because when you're sitting in that top chair in particular, you have the owner to where, and some owners are incredibly involved and take up a lot of time and resources. But then you also have the business side, the fans, the media, community relations, public relations. I could go on and on. Training staff, security, PR. We won't go through every job in the NBA, but staffs have swelled. I remember the 3 of us probably sound like dinosaurs, talking about 25 to 35 years ago, 40 years ago when we came in the league. But you remember it was just a small group of people. You get together, huddle real quick, and that was it. Now they're, layers on tops of layers of people. So I think delegation's a must. And so what Tommy's doing now, it's extremely valuable. I'm not saying that because he's a friend and because he's on here. It's really valuable because in a lot of ways, most of us are pretty ill-prepared from those like CEO aspects to sit in that top chair for the first time, because there's so many different things coming at you. Everybody thinks their thing is the most important. And to me, it's like a juggler. You got 50 balls. You're trying to keep them all in the air without hitting the ground. It's almost impossible if you don't know what you're doing and can prioritize and delegate appropriately.
Thank you, Ryan.
Well, and I would say the other thing too, to piggyback on that, and for everyone who's on here, and we've had we've been fortunate that we've worked in a front office and we've broken in probably somewhat similarly here, and it's a little bit different it's a lot different than it is now as far as getting in. And so, and one of the things, Ryan and Tommy and I've talked about is like, when we do Sports Business Classroom in Las Vegas, it's really very, a bit of front office basketball focus, which it should be. That's kind of the goal of it. But there's 90% of other things within an organization, as far as for people, whether it be marketing or public relations or social media or, analytics, but on the media sides or finance or like there's such a big web of opportunities out there. I had somebody I met with, this was a long time ago, and they had gotten an offer to work in selling tickets at the Nets, and they were an intern for me, and they turned it down. And I want to like wring this person's head. I said, like there's your opportunity. Like all you need to do is like get your foot in the door. Like
Yeah.
that is the biggest thing. You get your foot in the door because I remember like we had somebody back in the day and he was working in marketing and he'd come down to my office like once a week for an hour. He'd come down and he wanted to talk basketball. And I when we got to it, we had an opening. And I said to maybe it was Rod or maybe it was Willis. I said, like, I think this guy would be pretty good for us. Like, we can mold him into something like we see fit and everything like that. And that's the biggest thing is like, if you have an opportunity, do not be, blind. Don't have blinders on because I want to work in front office. I want to make trades. Like that stuff doesn't happen. Like, yeah, you got to go in there and take advantage of the opportunity that is presented to you.
Well, I just thank everybody for jumping on here tonight and shows that you're wanting to learn and learn more about this business. These opportunities are golden. Bobby, Ryan, the experience that they've had, all of us together, it's just so we can pass it on to everybody else.
Let's get a couple more here, and I'm going to answer a bunch. Has analytics, which I always just say is a fancier word for stats, found its way into the draft process or free agent process?
Has it found its way into the draft process?
I think it's been there.
Oh man, I would say it's a compass for a lot of teams in the league. I still believe it's a tool, not a compass, but I think that you can't have that without you would never buy a house without knowing who built it, when it was built, what materials were used. These are $1 million picks. These are multi-million-dollar picks. You're going to want to know everything you can. And the numbers sometimes just they do a great job of saying, hey, avoid this group here, this type of player, these kinds of statistics do not make it in the NBA. Ignore them at your peril. I think I've always found them very valuable to help you in the evaluation process.
Yeah, and similarly to the pre-draft workouts, we'd use them in case our gut or our group's gut was pretty different than, if we really like a guy and the analytics show him poorly, why is that the case? Should we watch film? Let's really talk to the guys who put together the analytical model and came up with the output as far as why does this guy look so poor? We actually kind of like him. Or on the other end of the spectrum, hey, maybe we wrote this guy off too soon. He really produced at a high level. Maybe he doesn't have the requisite size, athleticism, whatever it may be. Doesn't look the part, but geez, he really produced. Let's go back and watch the film. And so one of the other things too that we did, and I'm sure you guys did as well, is you'd overlay them with past years too. So it's not just comparing the guys in the 2026 draft to other guys in the 2026 draft. It's comparing them historically and saying, okay, these guys' stats, this guy's stats match up to this guy's in years past, or here are the most similar players. I thought that was really interesting, and like Tommy said, it'll help point you in the right direction. And for me, help kind of prioritize. And where are you going to spend your time? For me, it's to determine, especially on both ends of the spectrum, why do we like this guy more than the stats do, or why don't we like this guy enough? Do we not like this guy enough because the analytics really do like him?
The big thing when you start laying it out, height, what is their superpower? What are their physical gifts? And then the numbers are at every single game. Scouts go to most games. We see most people live, but scouts are there for every single game. I mean, the numbers are there for every single game. That's a Dean Oliver statement, and it's very, very true. So you got to pay heed to the numbers because they help eliminate mistakes that are commonly made, and you just can't seem to crack that code. Why do we keep making the same mistakes? Well, you're ignoring certain things that really have been proven to be true. This player can play in the NBA because of this, or this player cannot. And I think every year you still see some people sneaking by that get drafted that then pretty quickly it's realized all of that, and we win against the numbers. Just like going against your board, do it at your own peril.
And Bobby, one interesting one this year I want to get your take on is I haven't run it yet or talked to the guys who have, but I think Cameron Boozer's going to be off the charts, like historically good. I'd also bet a lot of money today, not that we encourage that kind of thing here at SBC, that he's not going to be the number one pick. Right? So the analytics guys, I think, across the board, by and large, will have him one, maybe to a historical level in terms of how productive he was as a freshman. Some of the scouts that I've talked to have, concerns about whatever defense, explosiveness, all that. So that's a fascinating one, and that's where, to our earlier conversation with the in the room disagreements become pretty heated at times, and you got to try to keep a level head and figure out what is the right answer because, the kid just had a historic, year, and based on the numbers, at least my gut tells me he's going to be well ahead of the pack as far as the best overall player on the board from an analytical perspective.
Let's go. Let's throw up the Jackson or Jordan, the SBC. If you could throw up the SBC slide. All right, so this is what we talked about earlier here. This is our immersive experience for people who are interested. You can go on sportsbusinessclassroom.com, immerse/immersive. It's a program that's run July 12th to the 18th. This is in Las Vegas. It's during Summer League. Summer League starts on the 9th to the 19th. I've been involved. This will be my third year, and then certainly we did an all-star version here, and basically how the immersive program works is, as I mentioned before, you're broken up by your major, which is kind of a specialty. And then we come together as a group and we do programming that starts on that Monday. We go Monday to Thursday. We do deep dives at night based on if you want to learn about salary cap or media broadcast, agent NIL, and then scouting video analytics. We do a mock trade deadline at the end of the week. Presentations in front of the group. We had a all-star version of people that kind of came through, anyone from the commissioner to AJ DeBonsa to Nick Nurse. Certainly Tommy and Ryan have been involved. We've had you get one-on-ones with professionals in this business. It's a great experience. If this is something that you have interest for, in the chat there, certainly there's information there, and you can email Jackson or Jordan in there. But as I said, this is a program. We're starting to kind of build out a little bit of the programming, and we're lining up our instructors, and it's a great week because it's at Summer League, right? Like you can actually walk and watch a game and at night, and you can do. There's a lot. It's a great networking. Networking is probably the most important thing that you can go through, that you can do right now. The ability to reach out to people. The worst thing they could say is no. The ability to a lot of people want to help or give advice or try to kind of lead you down the direction here. And this program gives you that opportunity. So if you are interested, you can go on sportsbusinessclassroom.com, the immersive. You can see a lot of the information that we had from last year. We've got the programming from last year, what it looks like here, but it's a terrific week for everyone to get involved in.
Yeah,
yeah.
I just follow up on that, Bobby. I think one of the things that I'd urge the viewers to take advantage of is the networking aspect of it. And it's something that's difficult, but to be honest, when people say, well, I want to get into sports, there's no way that any of the three of us can tell you how to get in the NBA in a half an hour, even an hour one-on-one. We're just not going to have time. But one of the reasons I love the SBC and the immersive experience, and the reason I've done it, I think every year going back to 2019, if not longer, I did it as a guest when I was with the Suns or on the team side, is you show folks exactly how to get their foot in the door and get a job in sports. And I don't know what the numbers are, Bobby, you may know, but I think it's well into the hundreds now as far as folks who have come through the program and gotten their start in sports. So if you're serious about working in the profession, you want to do it, you can afford to be there in terms of the time and the cost and all that. To me, it's a no-brainer. Like you should do it because the success rate is so high. And one quick story I'll tell is through the SBC program, when I was on NBA TV the past 5 years, kind of helping anchor their trade deadline coverage in February and then their free agency coverage in June into July, I'm not nearly as good, frankly, with the salary cap stuff as Bobby Marks is. He's one of the best in the world at that. I needed some help. And so the guy who helped me, Anil Gogna, you two know, I met through this program and we worked together on it. So there are a number of different adjacent opportunities that come out of it. It may be with a team, maybe with an agency, it could be with a sneaker company, a sponsor, etc. I won't go through all the possibilities, but I really feel passionately about the program. And like Bobby said, people want to help. That's one of the neat things about it. And I think some of the folks, I saw somebody chime in the chat a moment ago that they've done SBC before and would highly recommend it. I put my own stamp on that too. There's a reason guys like Tommy and I keep coming back year after year.
Absolutely.
All right, gentlemen, that was awesome. Appreciate you guys jumping on here tonight and everything. I appreciate everyone that has that jumped on. I thought it was something that just kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and show everybody kind of once we with this offseason already starting, kind of what goes on. So I appreciate you, Tommy. I appreciate you, Ryan, for jumping on. And as I said, if you want to learn more about the program, you can go on sportsbusinessclassroom.com.
That was Bobby Marks, Tommy Sheppard, and Ryan McDonough breaking down how NBA front offices approach the offseason. To learn more about the Sports Business Classroom and how you could be a part of the immersive experience during NBA Summer League in Las Vegas, be sure to visit our website and follow us across social channels. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone looking to break into the business of basketball. Thanks for listening to the Sports Business Classroom audio experience. We'll see you in the next episode.